on this computer. Share the screen. Okay. And so, Vaibhav, Aisha, can you guys see the screen okay? Got a yes. All right. So, welcome everybody. Today we're going to build an Express server, live code it together, and just spilled some water on my computer. So I wanted to get a sense. A couple people asked for some specific things. Misha, you were asking about SQL, connecting to a SQL database. So what is it that that you'd like to know or you'd like to get out of this with respect to that?
Well, I was just wanting to see how it would route to SQL database.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all know what a SQL database does, but it's like how, I mean, I guess, yeah, connecting that route on.
Yeah, that was one, connect a SQL or an Express server with a SQL database. Okay. What else? What else are we wanting to look at or do or get out of this?
Maybe just like an example of testing.
An example of testing? Okay.
There you go. That's great. Testing from. That's all.
Anything else?
A little bit about middleware.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Was that Theo? Huh? Oh, Vaibhav? Yeah. Okay. Middleware. How to use body parser. Cool. Sounds pretty good. So let's build this in increments, and I'm going to ask for the people. Let's see. For the people that are here and the people online to come off mute and kind of chime in so that we're building this collaboratively. So pull open a terminal here. It's about as big as it's going to get. I'll go into the folder, 27. Great. So to start off, we'll, what's that?
I also wanted to, basically, what about middleware would you like us to know as far as when you ask us about us, what do you want us to be able to talk about?
Okay. Okay. And I'll say up front about that, you should know body parser, what it is, what it does, and how to use it. And you should be able to explain what middleware is.
Wait, hold on. Because I might have to. In piggybacking what she said, how well do you want us to explain middleware? Because I found so many simplistic, definitions of middleware, and then I found those really in-depth ones. I know people who didn't pass because they knew what middleware was, but they didn't give that in-depth answer. So Sabrine's question is pretty valid. Like, what answer are you guys looking for from us?
Mm-hmm. Who can describe what middleware is? Who can give an example?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Aisha.
I think I'll just take a stab at it, but I guess I would explain it as a bridge between your server side and I guess A bridge between your files?
I wouldn't describe it quite that way.
Okay.
Who wants to take another shot at it? Jen?
So it would just random stuff. It would be like a bridge between two pieces, like two software frameworks.
Yeah, it's getting warmer.
Is all the code in between your client side and your server side? Is all the code in between that connects them?
Sort of.
Okay. See,
I'm glad we're looking at this.
no, thank you.
Sabrin?
Is it okay? So I know Express abstracts away the process of HTTP communication. So is the middleware that abstraction of it, or what you use for that?
No, not really. No. Jedi?
So my understanding is it's the actual Transcendence business logic that you're writing in between Express and your endpoint. So all the things that you're writing to handle what happens when you get a route, that's happening at least through your middleware. I'm not sure if that exactly is the middleware itself, but that's the best explanation.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Sal, do you want to?
It's kind of close to what Janice said. It's kind of like I think of it as a filter that's between the server and the client.
Yeah.
Side. Like so it's a piece of code in the middle that filters the request between the server and the client side. So that's how I think of it.
Yeah. Yeah, so for folks who might not have heard that, Sal described it as a filter between the request and the response. Is that what you said? Yeah, and I think it's pretty accurate. Middleware has its name because it exists in the middle of a process. So Express's process, and you can have middleware for all sorts of different things. Express is just one type of thing that uses middleware. But the idea is that Express has this process of getting requests and sending responses. And that's, kind of the basics of a web server. And sometimes it's very useful in the middle of that process to do some things. So for example, body parser, which we're going to use today, when Express, as it's, Express kind of out of the box, when it gets some JSON in the body of a post request, that JSON actually comes in as a string. It's not actually JSON. It's not been parsed to JSON. So if you tried to access it, you would be accessing a string. You wouldn't be able to access a certain property. You wouldn't be able to, it wouldn't show up for you as an object. And so we use this thing, body parser, and specifically the JSON body parser filter. I mean, it's middleware. Use the JSON body parser middleware to take that string and convert it into a JSON object that you can interact with. And so every time a post request comes in that has a body that's marked as JSON, where the content type is JSON, body parser will do this. And so that's the middleware part of it. It's like the request comes into the server, and then before we get to all of that response logic, I'm going to look at this, I'm going to send this, I'm going to look up something in my database, and then I'm going to send it back. Before we get there, we do something in the middle. And that's what middleware is. And in the case of body parser, it's taking that text and turning it into a readable object that you can use.
So before it converts that text, it's just in a regular string, like visibly readable string, or is it like string that's just for the computer process?
Yeah, it would be like any other text, like if you sent 100 words in the body of a post request, it would show up just like that. It would show up as like bracket, space, quotes, this, whatever, because there isn't anything native in Express that parses that into JSON. And so that's why we add body parser.
Okay, and that turns into JSON.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for the purposes of your development here at the Guild and what you need to know going into P3, practice this definition. I would suggest practicing it with each other, describing middleware as this thing that happens in the middle of this express response process, and that it's something, what's important to say is you can add middleware to an express server, and we'll do that. And middleware is something that happens after the request comes in, but before the response happens. One example of which is body parser, which parses the body of a post request into something that you can work with. Pretty clear? Good questions.
Hi, Justin. Can I ask something?
Hold on a second, Michelle. We'll do Bybov and then you. What's up, Bybov?
All right, so without using the body parser, if I try to access the body from the request object, it gives me undefined. So is the body parser adding a new key value pair to the request body? Is that what it is doing?
Is it adding a new key value pair to request body?
To the request object. So initially, without the use of body parser, the request object, when you make a post request, it does not have a body. But if you use the middleware body parser and use JSON or URL encoded, it goes ahead and adds the body key so that you can access the values inside of the body. I don't know if that is accurate, but that was my understanding.
Yeah, I guess I didn't understand it that way, but that may be right, that request.body isn't defined until you use a body parser. So body parser actually assigns a value to that. Yeah, I'm going to make a note to double check on that, but thanks for bringing that up, Bybov. So the question is rec.body defined before using body parser? Cool. And Misha, you had a question?
I was just trying to clear up the definition of middleware.
Yeah.
So I was just taking a piece of what you said. Middleware exists in the middle of a process. The process of getting a request and sending responses is expresses middleware. It is the code that happens after the request and before the response. Does that sound pretty passable for a test?
That sounds pretty passable, yeah. And then just being able to use and talk about body parser specifically. But you'll see middleware in other cases. So if you get into React and Redux, so Redux is one form of state management in React. Redux is built around this kind of flow. Again, it's like a process where you have actions that change the state of your application, and the changes in state are reflected in changes in the UI. But sometimes in that process, it's useful to have something happen in the middle, just like body parser. So you will encounter things like Redux middleware, and there's a whole kind of world of that. And the important thing to take away is that, again, it's like if you had a line of people, something comes in on one side, that person passes it to the next person. Maybe that person takes it and flips it upside down and they pass it to the next person. Maybe that person writes their name on it and they pass it to the next person. It's like those people are the middleware. They're taking something, doing something with it, and then passing it on. I hope that clarified things and didn't confuse things. So let's build something. So we're gonna do an npm init and just say yes to everything. I think that worked. Yeah. So we want to do an npm install of Express. And that's what we'll start with, and we'll kind of add things as we go. Cool. So we're building a server, so why don't we create a file called server.js. And here we go. So what do we need at the top? Require express. Yep. And that is yep. Const express equals require express. And then I want to explicitly add a router to this. You don't have to, so you don't have to do this, but a lot of, like basically all the time when you're building an Express app, you will create different routers that you then add to your Express app. So we're going to create a router like this called router equals express.router. So I figured the first thing that we could do.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The dot router, this is I've never seen that syntax before. Usually when you do like a const app or router, you invoke the express functionalities. What does dot router here means? You know, just invoking the express function.
Say that again. What does router?
So the syntax I've seen before is that like const router equals express and you invoke the function. So basically to have access to express the built-in functions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure like what dot router here means.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna hold off on router for a minute. We'll come back to that. So are you talking about const app equals express? Yeah. Yep. So this is where we instantiate our Express server. We take it from the Express library and actually make a server. Yeah.
Exactly. That's a little bit that I've seen so far.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So let's build a route that takes in a word, and what do I want to do with it? Let's just have a route that takes in a word and sends back text that is repeating that word. So we're just going to do something very simple to it. What do we do next? App.get. And why app.get? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to use the get method. And there are these different HTTP methods: get, post, put, delete. We're going to use get. Great. And so what's next?
You gotta specify the link, or like the location where you want it to do the get method,
Mm-hmm.
or the address.
Yeah, I guess I don't know the official term for this, but I would call this the route. So the route for this one, let's have it be repeat. And then we're going to take in a word at the end of that. And that's what that colon does. So colon will set it'll set a variable or a property on the request.params object that is word, and that's whatever goes here. Now, cool. So what next? Yes. All right. And what does it take?
It takes two arguments, request and response.
Exactly. Great. So it takes two arguments, request and response. I like to abbreviate them rec and res, but you'll also see it request and response. Most important thing is be consistent when you're writing an app. Be consistent with yourself. If you're working on code with more than one person, be consistent with whatever the code base is doing. So we take in a request and response object, and what we know is we're going to take that response object and we're going to ultimately call, in this case, send, because we want to send a response. But there's something that we want to do before we even get there, which is we want to get the word from the path. So the parameter word. Who knows how to access that? Sure. What do you got, James?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see that you were talking. So I just set a variable to rec params.word.
Okay, great. So we'll do const word equals rec.params.word. Yeah. And who knows the kind of slicker ES6 way to do what we just did there? Destructuring. So const word equals rec.params. You guys see the difference? These two do the exact same thing, right? Yeah, destructuring is pretty nice. And so what it's saying is instead of this syntax right here is what makes the difference. And it says, look for this property. So we're creating a variable, we're creating a constant here, word, but we're also saying, look on the rec.params object for the property word for the value of this, right? And so it's a bit of a shorthand, but it can be very useful when you're doing imports of lots of different things. You know, when you're trying to get something off of an object.
And then so does the curly braces, does that mean somehow it's going to be an object at some point, or it's not related to that?
Yeah, I mean, the curly braces in this case, you know, when they're before the equal sign, are really just indicative of we are using this destructuring syntax. And you're right that what it's saying is what comes after the equal sign is some kind of object off of which we are pulling these properties. Yeah? Cool. So we've got a word. So now, what do we do next? What's that? Yeah, so let's send something.
I have a question for so when you want to repeat the word by repeating, are we going to specify how many times you want to repeat it?
Let's just repeat it once. So if somebody types in hello, we'll send back hello, hello. So what do we want to put here? So send takes, or we'll give it in this case just one argument, which is what we're sending back. And let's send back word and word. Okay?
I was thinking something else from math, like times 2 or something.
Oh, yeah.
Complicated.
Yeah, you know what's great? In Python, Bonnie will appreciate this. In Python, you can take a word and multiply it by 2 and you get 2 of the word. It's like, it's just a very like kind of fun syntax. Great, so response, send, word. So let's give this a shot and see if this is working. So the way to do that is we want to start up the server. And we can do that with node server.js. Oh, wait, we're missing a relatively key piece here. What are we missing? No.
I usually start with listen just so I can have the server know that it's there and check to see if it's working before I do my app hits, but
yeah,
how you start is how you want to start it. So I usually start with the app.listen to see if it works.
Yeah. Yep. When I'm building an Express app, usually this is the first thing I type, this is the second thing I type, and the third thing would be something like this, app.listen. And then we want to port, and in this case, let's just do 3000. And then this is a callback function. And what we want to do is just say console.log server is listening on port 3000. Yeah. One thing to, well, we'll get to that in a minute. So let's give this a shot. All right, some errors. Unhandled error event. What?
Something's running on the port.
Oh yeah. I think I have a server already running on 3000, which is probably the problem.
I wonder why they would not just put server already in use instead of that syntax that you have to figure out.
Well, they kind of do here. It was somebody over here that pointed this out. And what did you see that had you recognize it was a port thing?
Well, I've had this before. But also it says, in use 3000. That was kind of my.
Yep. Yeah. So sometimes it is like, shouldn't these library developers come up with some better errors? That's sometimes the case. Like sometimes library developers really could stand to make some better error codes. But sometimes it just takes a little bit of kind of looking, and the information that you really want that helps you zero in on what the problem is there.
The only way I knew this error is because, like what James said, I've seen it before.
Yep.
But I had to Google it first.
Yeah.
I'm just curious why they just didn't write port already.
They could. Maybe you can create an issue on the Express repo.
I had a comment on this. I wish there was some way for us to tell Express, choose a port that is open, because in your computer, 3000 is taken. If I bring the same code to my computer, that might work. So I don't know if there is a way to tell Express to find a port that is not taken and use that.
Sure. Well, we could write a little bit of code here that, I don't know exactly what it is in Node, but we could have it check for which ports are available. So we could say, start with 3000. Is 3000 available? If so, app.listen 3000. And if not, keep cycling up. It's not a particularly useful use case, though, because all the time when you're starting a server, you're going to want to know what the port is. And most of the time, you're going to be intentionally specifying the port. So web servers usually run on 80. And there are specific ports that are often for specific things. But it's an interesting it's an interesting thought, and it could be implemented in probably just a few lines.
All right, thank you.
So let's see.
Justin?
Yeah.
Quick question, since we're on it. Does the when storing the port in a variable, what does the I thought process.env handled that, where you did a .env for 3000, and then it would give you, if 3000 wasn't available, then the env would search for something else. Is that true or false?
It's true that that's one kind of common pattern for specifying the port, and it's not necessary, not strictly necessary. But if I get what you're, what's the expression? If I'm picking up what you're putting down. If I'm picking up what you're putting down, it'd be something like const port equals, and then we go to the environment variable, so process.env.port. And if port is not set, then we want to specify 3000. Right? So you guys, do y'all understand this syntax, how this works, why this works? You know, it's a logical OR. So that's an OR. But what it's really functioning as is it's saying this thing, or if that's not a thing, that thing, right? And so then we can do port, and we can turn this into a template literal. You know that expression, template literal? That's what the backticks do. And that allows you to do this very nice syntax of that. So now, it should still work to default to port 3000, and it does. But now we can do this. We can do port equals 3001, and now it's listening on 3001. And configuration like this is very useful in a handful of cases, testing different environments, all of that. So it's nice sometimes to build this into your app. Sometimes it's necessary to do that. So good. So we've got a server going. Let's go back to port 3000. Okay. And now let's open up Postman. Bring this up here. Does everybody have Postman installed on your machine? This is it would be possible for us to test this route by just going to a web browser, because web browsers make GET requests kind of natively. That's what, when you type something into the address bar, it's doing. But this allows us to make all sorts of different kinds of requests quite easily. So so up here we want to put our request URL, which in this case is a localhost, port 3000, and then what was it? Repeat, and then our words. So let's do hello.
You don't need the colon?
No. So the colon is a syntax that Express understands. And what that's saying is whatever goes here, turn it into a parameter. But if we put a colon here, we might get an error just because you're not supposed to have colons in that part of the URL, I think. So let's go ahead and send it and see what we get back. Hello, hello. Victory. So everybody with me up till this point, how this worked, why we did what we did? Getting some head nods. Good.
I'm getting an error.
You're getting an error?
Oh, okay, never mind. I know what it is.
Okay. Cool. So let's do a couple other things here, because res.send is kind of the bare bones of what we need to do, but almost always you're going to be doing some other things. So this response, we can chain different things onto it. And what we'll do here is first set a, what do we want to set? A response code, a status code. And so what status code should we send here? 200. Does anybody know like exactly what 200 stands for? I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's just okay. Yeah, so it's like thumbs up, response came in okay, everything, you know, here's your response back. So that'll send 200 back, and I wonder if we look at this one.
It's actually right there.
Oh yeah, yeah. So Express will default to 200 if you do a res.send, but we'll send to 200 intentionally here. And then what's one other thing that we might want to attach to this response?
Catch it as an error.
Say that again?
Do a catch it as an error.
We could. I actually don't know what the error handling looks like if you're chaining something onto res.
Well, I guess what we could do is we could check if word is a string, and if it's not, we can say res.status 400.
Okay. Great. So what Baiba was saying, let's check and see if word is a string, and if it's not, let's send back an error. So if, how do we want to do this? Check.
Do a type of maybe like error.
Type of word triple equals string. So maybe we want to do if not. Then we'll do a response and send back what error code?
400.
400, yeah. And just pull up the error codes. Or the status codes. Dope. Status codes. It's not important that you memorize every single one of these, but it is important that you know, like, that the 200s are successful and that the 400s are, what do they call it here? Error. And the 500s, server error. Yep. You've probably seen this surfing around the web. Is like every now and then you'll see this pop up on your screen, which means something went wrong enough that they're not even able to serve you a page that says, oop, we had an error kind of behind the scenes. Sorry about that. Something went wrong, and you're actually seeing the kind of underlying server error. So, yeah, so you'll want to be thoughtful about which one of these you choose. In this case, 400 bad request is quite appropriate. You know, we wanted a string and you sent us something else. So good. And let's finish this out. So we'll res.status and then res.send. And what do we want to send?
Maybe like a text saying this is not a string or something. It's like something message, an error message.
Yeah, parameter submitted is not a string. We can say error. Parameter submitted is not a string. Now, there's something kind of funny about this. You know, this type of error checking, great to do in most cases, or really in all cases, except that in this case, I can't think of a scenario in which word right now would not be a string, right? Because Express is parsing this part of the URI, and it's going to parse it as a string, right? So we could type something funky into there. We could type a number, but my guess is that Express is just going to always parse it as a string. So we can restart our server here. We can also use NodeMon. You guys know about NodeMon? Good. Server.js. So NodeMon just watches the files in your directory tree and restarts the server whenever anyone is changed. So now if we go to Postman and let's just try this, we'll send a number. And it still gives us 3.3 because what it got was a string. So something like this, good in many cases, but in this case, not necessary.
I think the mistake I would have made, Justin, is when I was trying in Postman, I would have specifically put word instead of just the random.
So it would have been kind of confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So there's one other thing that you want to be sending back really in all cases to, with your response, and who knows what that is. So there's something that you want to be sending with a response or specifying with a response basically all the time.
Is it the header type or the content type that we're responding with?
Yes, content type. So we set the content type. This is the way to set any number of headers. And so we set the content type by content type. And then, in this case, I would, there are a couple options, but I would do application text. And so now, if we look at our previous responses, the headers we got back, so Express automatically set text HTML, which notably is not what we're sending back. We're not sending back HTML. So now let's do this again, and we'll say monkey. And so the body we get back is monkey monkey, and the content type is application text.
Quick question. So in terms of when we're chaining these, I'm guessing that send has to be the last thing that you say before, like, you need to set your type before you send?
Yeah, so what James is saying is, does send have to be the last thing that you send? I'm actually not sure, because I'm kind of wondering what happens if you do this. So we're going to send back a 201 status code, except it's happening after the send. And let's just see if that goes through. Yeah, so that does not go through. We still got a 200. But if we put this back before the send, we should get the 201. Oh. Try it again. Yeah, 201. Cool. So we've got just a couple more minutes, and this is something we can build on for office hours tomorrow. Why don't we start into a post route, and then we can pick up where we left off.
One of the things you mentioned, how to connect the database onto the server.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so connecting the database. I mean, I'll give you the kind of like verbal thing that I'd say about it, and then we can actually go and implement it tomorrow. But if you're thinking about, oh, I'm building an Express server and I need to connect it to SQL, SQL database, and that's confusing. Like, how do I do that? If you're thinking that, that's totally normal. And what's useful is to think about separating the concerns and kind of abstracting one thing from the other. So when you're wanting to connect to a database, when you have an Express server and you're wanting to connect to a database, what you're really saying is this Express server is going to want to get information from something and send it out. And really, that something could be anything. It could be an object, it could be a file, it could be a SQL server. And so what you want to do is, on the database side, create your database, create your schema, all of that, but make some functions available to your server that allow it to get and put the information that you're working with. So if you had a task database, for example, in your Express server, you do not want to be sending SQL queries. You want the SQL queries to be in a separate file, like you're really separating these concerns. So you'd have a database file, and in that database file, you connect to the database, you write some functions that query the database and that pull some things out, and then you take those functions and you make those available to this Express server. So all the Express server has to worry about is calling a function like get tasks or add task.
And do you make it available by importing?
Yep. Yeah, when I say make available, that would be you export from the database file a handful of functions, add task, complete task, whatever it is. And then in the Express file that you've got, the server file, you would be importing those functions and then using those. And so that's, I know for the visual learners or kind of tactile hands-on learners, it's a verbal description, but that's something that we can build out tomorrow when we get into it. I'm inclined to wrap it up now, and we'll get to post, and we'll get to some database integration. We'll do some testing. We can kind of.
Super helpful. Yep.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
What was the most helpful about it for you or for anybody?
The fact that you went through it step by step, and then you ask questions so that we'd have to think about what it's actually doing or why it's doing it. It kind of makes things like.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I had no idea what Postman did. We spent a whole bunch of yesterday digging through properties and stuff to find what it just shows me.
Yeah, so I was saying he had no idea what Postman is, and now he does.
This was helpful because I think yesterday I was saying, oh, you weren't here. I wanted to see like the bigger picture, and like the questions that we're asking is like leading to the bigger picture. It's like, okay, this is how we set up report, route. Now let's make our connections to these files. Like that's what I needed, because like doing these tutorials, I get all the small pieces. Like I knew how to do SQL before we changed this whole thing, but I did not know how to make my route connect to my table, things like that. So that's why this is important, because it's like we get to see it live, and like Sabrina was saying, it tested what we really know. Like you asked the question, I was like, "Ooh, I know that based off I look at my notes," but it helped me kind of reaffirm the knowledge. So I appreciate this, and a continuous would be great.
Good. I'm so glad this has been helpful. Yeah. So
totally. Like also the speed of building things, explaining things. It's just like it's very helpful. It's not too fast, it's not too slow. Like
you're a good teacher.
Oh, thanks.
think about it as we code it. It's very helpful.
Good. Yeah, not too fast, not too slow, but thinking about it as we do it.
Yeah. Trying things. It's very helpful.
Cool.
Even the verbal description you mentioned about the connecting the database to the server was also very helpful. So
Oh, good.
I look forward to build it step by step.
Let's do it. All right, folks. I'll post this online a little bit later today. When the if you don't know the background of this, every time you finish a Zoom chat, it'll process the recording, which takes it's like 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and then you upload it to YouTube, and YouTube has to process it and all of that. I will get it up online as soon as possible, and I'll also link to the GitHub repo where we're building this out.
Thank you.
Cool. Have a good day.